Rosemary Wilson, last but not least, she is a local and international speaker. She's a human rights defender, and more than anything, she's a child of God. Rosemary wrote the book, My Journey from Sexual Abuse to Self-Empowerment. We're going to hear how she did that. She has a website that describes the book that she wrote. You can get the book from gaspingforbreath.org. In addition, Rosemary has she has a YouTube video, and I can send you everyone the link later. It's called Breaking Chains. And how does she intend to do this? She intends to break chains by empowering children. You'll hear why in a moment. Rosemary has a reputation of surpassing expectations and leaving things better than how she found them. This is how she does it. Not only does she have 30 years of leadership, mostly in local government, Rosemary Wilson, she began her career at Bridgeway House, where she developed the Transitional Employment Program. She expanded her community awareness from her parents and as a member of her local Adventist Youth Department, otherwise known as AYS. She served as Morris County's Urban League Employment Director before being promoted to the League's Economic Development Director, where she planned and coordinated the first entrepreneurial day at the then Allied Signal Corporation, Honeywell. The event was supported by several corporations, agencies, and companies, including the eight Fortune 500 companies, Allied Signal, Honeywell, Novartis, the Prudential Insurance Company, Warner Lambert, Pfizer, AT&T, Jersey Central Power and Light, ExxonMobil, and Colgate Palmolive. Mrs. Wilson Murray she served as the Director of Welfare Services for many years. And later on, she served as the Human Services Director in one of the wealthiest countries in America. Rosemary Wilson supervised the departments as Human Services Director, the Division of Aging, Recreation, the Health Department, Property Maintenance, Rent Leveling, and Emergency Annex.
Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. I've heard you say a number of times, you've called out different individuals who are friends of yours. And it got me to remember Shakespeare once said, "It's wonderful to be in the company of friends, even if they're someone else's." So I am thrilled to be in the company of all your friends, Dr. Marsh. I do remember Beverly, and I do remember her husband from Oakwood, then college, now university. I do regret that I never got to know you as well as I could have, Beverly, but that was because of my addiction. And so Maxine has asked, Dr. Marsh has asked me to speak about forgiveness. This topic can be empowering for many. It can also be triggering for others. And so, because the World Health Organization says that there's no health without mental health, I'd like to begin with a break. Since we haven't had a commercial and we've been talking for about an hour, I'd like to start with a calming technique that I particularly enjoy, and that is pace breathing. Last time, take a deep breath. Eyes closed, hold for 3. 1, 2, 3, exhale. And having done that, you should feel some kind of way, like a little bit more relaxed. Yay. I actually prefer doing safe place visualization. And if we have time, at the end of my presentation, or if Maxine gives me the okay, I'll walk us through safe place visualization. So, CDC statistic tells us that 1 in 5 women are sexually abused, traumatized, raped. The statistics also tells us that 1 in 17 males, the first statistics was the female, 1 in 17 males abused, sexually molested, raped. So we have 1 in 5 female, 1 in 17 males. I think that the CDC statistics is not correct because I never reported, and I was sexually abused starting at age 4. I'm horrified to think of what the true statistics could look like now that we've gone through COVID, where children have been at home with molesters, abusers, and re-traumatized or traumatized. So let me throw out Ruth 4:13 and Ruth 4:17, and kind of hang in there as I use this as my backdrop. So Ruth 4:13 states, Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And verse 17 tells us, and the women, her neighbors, Ruth's neighbors, gave him the name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So what does this have to do with trauma? Hang with me. Ruth is the most famous Moabite that we know of. So who were the Moabites? Well, the Moabites came about because of incest. Remember the story of Lot's 2 daughters getting him drunk and having sex with him, and both daughters became pregnant? Well, the oldest daughter gave birth to the descendants of Moabites. And the Moabites were known biblically for incestuous behaviors, abusing people, raping people. That is what the Moabites did. The Moabites were pagan nations. They didn't worship God. They didn't believe in Yahweh, but they were wealthy, powerful, and proud. And from this group of people, we have Ruth. That tells me that the God that we serve forgives in spite of the behaviors of people. And so my focus, my life journey focus has been more of what did I learn and not what went wrong. Because what went wrong was too painful. Forgiveness is a choice. It's not an easy choice. Sure, I wanted to see my abuser hanging from the closest tree. However, not to forgive left me with unspeakable triggers, rages of emotions that I could not control. I could sit in a congregation, Christmas time, hear the pastor talk about the virgin birth, listen to the excitement and the energy around Christmas, and be triggered by that. Was I a virgin? Would God have considered me worthy of being the carrier of the King of Kings and Lords of Lords? The news is filled with stories of individuals being raped and abused, male or female. These were all triggering events for me. and I began hiding in work. I couldn't work enough. And that's the reason why I didn't develop appropriate relationship with males and females. I presented well, always did, had closets full of the appropriate clothing, but my clothing were my shield. I was a die-hard workaholic. And so I made the decision that I could no longer live this way, hiding in the shadows of my abuse, walking around with a tape recorder of his voice in my head, telling me about the secret that I needed to keep, and slowly dying. I passed out 3 times, twice at work, once at Oakwood University, from sheer exhaustion. I didn't know when I was tired. When I was working, I never took sick days. I barely took vacation days. And so I was rewarded, it would seem, every 2 years with a promotion, making a significant amount of money, living in a very nice home, but alone. And so the decision was made that I must forgive. And Maxine has shared with you that I'm the author of the book, and the book is also on Amazon, Gasping for Breath, My Journey from Childhood Sexual Abuse to Self-Empowerment. And I'm going to read from page 27 of the book. My journey to tackling my fears and making peace with a sexual assault stimulated the courage to dig deeper into the realm of forgiveness. My desire to forgive my attacker was intentional, but the forgiveness process did not happen overnight. Over time, my attitude regarding the offense and the offender changed. I let go of revenge as I plodded towards forgiveness with vigor and deep breath. And so we started off with calming technique that I did that helped. I had a wonderful friend, and I have shared in the chat my site, gaspingforbreath.org. I've also shared in the chat my YouTube channel where I've talked about the process that I went through to get to the place of stability, to get to the place of wholeness. And I also wrote a second book, Rosa Ann Scott, Stories for Boys and Girls, The Adventures of Robert and Ruth, to help parents, to help empower children with coping skills so that they can become confident in themselves. And there is a story in this book that talks about grooming to help parents, giving them the platform that they need to open or begin the conversation on grooming. So the question can be, why forgive, and how did that make me feel? Well, like I stated, if I didn't forgive, I felt that if I did not forgive, I was signing my death sentence. I was now passing out because I couldn't tell when I was tired. I was working all the time. I was, at this point, a welfare director. And being a welfare director, I could easily work 24 hours a day. You know, the emergencies do not happen between 9 and 5, as you all know. And so I could get a call from the police at 2 o'clock in the morning because of an event that was taking place in a person's life. I could get a call on a Sabbath morning, afternoon, whether I'm in church or not. And so working as a welfare director was consuming in terms of my time, but that wasn't enough for me. I became a AY leader, did that for 2 terms, eventually did pretty much all the offices in a Seventh-day Adventist church. and eventually became an ordained elder. I eventually served on the executive committee for what we called Allegheny East Conference. I was working myself to death and still felt that I wasn't working enough. And so why was I working so much? Because I needed to silence the voice in my head that was telling me that this was a secret and that I couldn't share this information with anyone. I could only get relief when I worked. Work to me was no different than what a person does who's an alcoholic. No different than what a person does who's shooting up heroin. It's just a way that you manage. And so I developed a negative way of managing my fears that was suffocating me. And so because of this, it was important for me to forget that I was already dead. And so I needed to live. And maybe I needed to try forgiveness because I've done everything else. And forgiveness worked for me. I got down on my knees. I remember the day, the night. I held onto the carpet with my nails. And I wept and wept and wept. And the angels, I could imagine, lifted me up, put me in my bed, and I slept. And the miracle to that event was when I woke up the next morning, the voice was gone. And has never, ever returned. There are times that I've tried to remember his voice, but it's completely gone. And so I give God thanks. I give him the glory for taking me through, as Psalms 23 states, that we go through the valley of the shadows of death. And so that forgiveness helped me later on when I experienced another trauma, and that was a stalker who had a plan and was about to execute that plan in killing me. But because I'd already forgiven the sexual abuser, it became easier, not easy, but it became easier for me to forgive the stalker. Okay, Maxine, I hope that I stayed within the time frame that you've given me.